I'm Indy and this is Luke Rundle, and we are looking at homeostasis for our Biology 3.4 internal.
Homeostasis is the process by which an organism maintains a stable internal environment, even with fluctuating external factors.
Examples of homeostasis are the control of blood glucose levels, gas concentration, and osmotic balance, but we have decided to look at thermoregulation.
I'm focusing specifically on the hippopotamus amphibus,
And I am looking at the northern fur seal.
We've broken down our inquiry into 5 main questions. The point of thermoregulation is to keep the internal body temperature at a level that falls within the range of temperatures that will allow normal functions to be completed. As both hippos and seals are mammals, they have an ideal internal body temperature of around 35 to 38 degrees Celsius. If, for example, the hippo or the seal could not thermoregulate, and the internal body temperature rose to around 45 degrees, it would die.
This is because the enzymes used to catalyze the important biological reactions that occur throughout the body will denature due to the temperature, meaning that processes such as the Krebs cycle or the production of enzymes could not occur and the animal would die. On the other side, if the internal body temperature got too low, the rate of reaction for the biological reactions would slow down to the point that they are almost not happening, which would also kill the organism.
So to maintain the body temperature at the right level, there is a negative feedback loop. The first step is the input for thermoregulation. This is the internal temperature being too high or too low. This will be picked up by a receptor, which is a part of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus also acts as the controller. The temperature will always be constantly fluctuating around the ideal, as the external temperature will never be constant. The hypothalamus, described as the brain of the brain, is basically responsible for controlling all automatic responses such as hunger and sleep. If it picks up that the temperature is too high, there are a variety of responses, or effectors. It can trigger the hippo to move into a shady area or back into the water, or it can trigger the release of blood sweat. Blood sweat is an oily secretion made up of 2 unstable pigments. It basically acts as a natural sun cream, protecting the hippo from harsh UV rays, and will also help cool the hippo down. The process for it to be released is that the hypothalamus will detect a high blood temperature, which in turn would, after detecting this high temperature, it will synthesize certain neural hormones, which in turn will stimulate certain pituitary hormones, resulting in blood sweat oozing through the mucus glands. This will result in a reduction of temperature, which will complete the feedback loop. However, it's unlikely you'll ever need to cool down due to the hot environment that it lives in.
For the northern fur seal, there is still the use of thermoreceptors and hypothalamus receptors, but instead of the release of blood sweat, the seal uses either the process of vasodilation or vasoconstriction. Vasodilation is the widening of blood vessels, which causes an increase in blood flow. This increase in blood flow means there is more blood flowing to the surface of the seal's skin, which causes the heat to evaporate into the air as the blood is carrying the heat. Basically, the heat is being radiated from the body through the skin. Vasoconstriction is the exact opposite of vasodilation. The vessels constrict and lead to heat being conserved within the body as there is less blood flow to the skin surface. Basically, the hypothalamus either dilates or constricts the blood vessels, which causes more or less blood flow to the skin surface, and the output of that effect is the radiation of heat to the environment or the conservation of heat. And the end result is that the seal either cools down or it conserves its heat more better. And it is possible for a seal to overheat even though it lives in a cold climate, because they already have the blubber and fur coats that are great insulators. Seals also have an adaptation in their flippers to make vasodilation more efficient, which is that there are a lot of blood vessels in the flippers. The seals display a behaviour called sailing, which is when they stick their flippers into the air while in the water and let heat evaporate into the air. The adaptation makes vasodilation more efficient because with more blood vessels in the flippers, the rate of radiation increases, so the seal will cool down faster.
Hippos occupy the niche of being a predominantly water-dwelling mammal in Africa. Other mammals, such as rhinos and elephants, occasionally bathe or use mud to cool down, but hippos are the only one in Africa that stay mainly in the water. They are able to do this because they will not cool down excessively due to having very thick hides and a small surface area to volume ratio. However, this also means they cannot lose heat very quickly when they leave the water to eat. Also, this means they cannot vasodilate, which is the main form of thermoregulation for most other mammals. They feed mostly at night, but occasionally have to leave the water during the day to top up, as they are so massive. For them to do this, they must have techniques that allow them to thermoregulate effectively enough that they can survive the midday heat. Using blood sweat, they are able to survive long enough that they can eat their fill and hop back into the water. By being able to do this is a huge adaptive advantage, as it means that they can occupy a niche that no other mammal in Africa can.
Thermoregulation allows an animal to survive in a niche that it would otherwise not be able to. This widens its possible real niche and therefore increases its survival chance. The seal's adaptive fur allows it to live in a very cold climate which it would otherwise not survive in. The northern fur seals occupy a niche, but it is nearly the same as the stellar sea lions. Their population range is very similar, and this is because they are very similar animals, except that the northern fur seal has its larger fins that have adapted in order to thermoregulate better. The reason for the need to thermoregulate better is because the northern fur seal spends more time foraging in the water rather than closer to the shore, like the stellar sea lion. Northern fur seals spend the majority of their time foraging in the ocean, while the stellar sea lion prefers to stay close to the rocky shore, but they do sometimes go into the ocean. This difference in foraging is because the sea lion lacks the large flippers that are filled with blood vessels, and also they don't have the close fine hairs that fur seals do, and these act as extra insulation. This shows that because the northern fur seals have adapted to thermoregulate more efficiently, they are able to forage better, compared to the stellar sea lions, which are their competition. Both the northern fur seals and stellar sea lions have had their population been declining for reasons not yet proved, but there are still far more northern fur seals than stellar sea lions, and this could be because of the fur seals' more efficient thermoregulation, letting them forage easier than the stellar sea lions. Basically, the northern fur seals' more efficient thermoregulation lets them outcompete against the stellar sea lions, which they share a similar niche with.
If there is a mutation in the hippo's genetic makeup that means there is a gap in the metabolic pathway to produce a certain pituitary hormone, blood sweat will not be produced. The most likely result of this is that the hippo will only be able to feed during the day, and possibly only be able to feed at night, and possibly starve during the day, or will overheat as it tries to top up its nutrition. The most likely result of this is that the hippo will die before it reaches breeding age, so the mutation is unlikely to be passed on. Another factor that could result in the breakdown of the thermoregulatory process is drought. This could result in the hippo habitat exposing the hippos to the midday sun for a long period of time. If this persists, the hippo will walk upwards of 40 kilometres to find a new habitat. This will expose them to the sun for an even longer period of time. And as there is only so much blood sweat that can be produced, the hippo will most likely overheat and die if it does not find a shady area or another water area. Another example of outside factors causing a breakdown of thermoregulation is anthrax. 300 hippos in Uganda died of this in 2005. The bacterium infects the body through food and water supplies. The body tries to fight it off by inducing a high fever. This causes a breakdown in the thermoregulatory system. As the hippo's main adaptation to cool down is to prevent the external temperature affecting them as much through blood sweat, the high internal temperature is hard for them to reduce because of their inability to vasodilate effectively due to low surface area to volume ratio. This persistent high temp will eventually lead to death, as even when the fever breaks, the body will not cool down in enough time.
Guard hairs are the name for the outer layer of fur on the seal that acts as a waterproof layer. If this layer is penetrated, then water can leak through, drastically ruining the level of heat insulation. This means the seal has to vasoconstrict in order to preserve its heat, but even so, it is likely that its internal temperature will drop as it usually heavily relies on its fur. As it can only preserve so much heat, eventually the internal temperature will drop and most likely lead to the seal's death. There are two ways in which the seal can lose parts of its guard hairs. One is simply the tagging from scientists when they are trying to research and record data. The electronic tags are glued to the fur, and then when they need to be taken off, the fur is cut off along with the tag. The other way, which is far more common, is fighting between other seals. Northern fur seals are very territorial when it comes to mating, and they have to make sure to establish their territories before the females are ready to mate. This means that they have to defend their territories from competition from any other northern fur seals, which can lead to physical fighting. The bite wounds that they inflict can lead to the loss of guard hairs, which means a breakdown in thermoregulation.
Overall, both animals' ability to regulate internal temperature in both the marine and land habitats has allowed them to occupy specialised niches and become well established.